I know why you're here. You want to get infinite dynamite and blow stuff up in Astroneer. Here's how I built a massive dynamite farm that runs on its own and will continue getting us dynamite forever. There's a lot of different moving pieces in this farm, so before I show you all of the sections, here's a schematic of how it should look in the end. You can obviously change this up for your own preference, but this is how I built it. And then here's a list of all the items that I used for this farm. But feel free to make it smaller or bigger to suit your particular needs. Now let's start going through the sections. Number 1, power section. Obviously, to make it all work, you're gonna need some power. By the way, this farm is entirely autonomous, it doesn't require any player input, and it also generates its own infinite supply of power that doesn't depend on the sun or the wind. Basically, this whole farm uses tappers and is based on them. That's why I decided that for the power source we're gonna use tappers as well. We've got a ton of honeypots, because these produce organic the faster. Each honeypot produces 1 organic every 10 seconds. As you can see right here, we've got 16 different honeypots, each of them producing organic, through the tappers obviously, and then the auto arms are grabbing the organic and feeding it into smelting furnaces. I am using portable ones because they take less space, but you can use the normal smelting furnace if that's what you have. That turns the organic into carbon, which then gets fed into medium generators, and each generator produces 9 units of power per second. Here we've got 40 generators, that's the equivalent of 360 units per second. And as you can clearly see, it's more than enough to sustain our base. Now let's move on to the next section. Number 2, printers. Obviously, if you want to craft dynamite, you're gonna need to use the small printer, and 1 dynamite requires 1 explosive powder. Here I've placed way more small printers than we needed. I think 1 or 2 should have been enough, but I just went overboard with 8 of them. You definitely don't need that many, but they are cheap, it's just 1 compound each. I mentioned you're gonna need explosive powder in order to craft the dynamite, but where do you get the explosive powder? Well, that's the next section. Number 3, chemistry lab. Explosive powder is made here out of sulfur and 2 carbon. That obviously means we're gonna need something to get us infinite sulfur and then something else that's gonna get us infinite carbon. That's pretty straightforward. And then the chemistry labs do all the work from there. They create all of the explosive powder that we are using to get infinite dynamite. Let's first talk about the sulfur. Number 4, atmospheric condensers. These provide infinite sulfur when you're on Calidor or Atrox, because these are the only planets where you're gonna find sulfur, but each of them uses 20 units of power per second, so that's a pretty high power input you'll have to give. But other than that, you don't have to do anything else, just set up some auto arms to grab the sulfur, and there you go, you've got infinite sulfur. This one's actually pretty easy, so let's move on to the next section. Number 5, farming area. This works exactly like the power source we talked about earlier. The tappers create organic from honeypots, then auto arms grab that and feed it into smelters. The smelter gets carbon, and then the auto arms do all of the work of taking the carbon and feeding it into the chemistry lab, and that's where the sulfur also comes. We've already talked about the chemistry labs and how they create explosive powder, and then the printers create the dynamite. So at the end you're gonna be receiving infinite dynamite. You don't have to do anything for this farm after it's built. You don't need to provide power, it will never stop, it will never lose power, it will never go any faster or any slower. It's a constant producer of dynamite, and it's truly infinite. If we wanted it to go even faster, we could add some more honeypots on the carbon side, but I don't think we need to do that because I'm pretty sure we've got hundreds of dynamites here already. You can't see all of them because they're all glitched through one another, but I've let this farm run for like half an hour and I'm sure we have hundreds if not thousands of dynamite already. Now it's time to actually use all of these dynamite, so let's blow some stuff up. Let's start by taking some dynamite from here, which is literally infinite at this point, and we'll start small with just 10 dynamite, but then I want to go overboard and use 5 silos, so that should be around 120 dynamite. Let's set our dynamite over on this side, and I'll set it all around here so that we blow up the most things possible. I'm also scattering some hydrazine through here. This will make the explosion a little bit bigger, and we're gonna activate it by this dynamite, so let's go ahead and do that. Whoa, that was a big one. Look at the crater. Oh, but how did the platform survive? Most of the platforms survived. That's weird. Oh, and we collected so much ammonium here and even compound. Look at all these materials. Well, that's a good way to collect a ton of ammonium for hydrazine. Somehow our shuttle disappeared, but this thing survived. That's pretty interesting as well. Alright, so all of this was just 10 dynamite and some hydrazine. Now let's go to over 100. Actually, what did I promise? 120. That's what we're gonna do. So I'll get some silos in here and then we can do that. Okay, so we've got 5 full silos right here. And we're gonna blow all of these up, but not before adding some hydrazine. I'll make sure to add at least 100 hydrazine as well. I'm not actually counting these, I'm just throwing them in there. But this should be a pretty good explosion right here. I hope the game doesn't freeze up from it, but we'll see what happens. I'm gonna position my drone right here so that we can see the whole explosion. So we're gonna be able to switch to it right after this starts blowing up. So let's detonate. And there it goes. Whoa. That's a big crater. That's way bigger than I expected. Let's zoom out a little bit. Look at how big this thing is. That's insane. Alright, now let's see how deep we went in there. Oh, and look at all of those resources. We've got so much quartz right here. And we got into the first cave layer, but that's about it. We could start blowing our way to the core with this strategy, because we now have all of the dynamite we need. And yes, I've built this in creative mode, but you can have it in survival where you actually need all of that dynamite to be crafted for you. We are probably also gonna build a smaller version of this farm in our survival save. If you don't know, the survival save I'm referring to is the Aatrox series playlist. You should go watch that next, or you can also click on this other video. Whichever one you choose, I'll see you there. Cheers, Astroneers!